Toward the autumn of 1913, the pressure which I had felt in me was seeming to move outward, as though there was something in the air. The atmosphere actually seemed to me darker than it had been. It was as though the sense of oppression no longer sprang exclusively from a psychic situation, but from concrete reality. This feeling grew more and more intense. In October, while I was alone on a journey, I was suddenly seized by an overpowering vision. I saw a monstrous flood covering the northern and low-lying lands. Between the North Sea and the Alps, when I came up to Switzerland, I saw that the mountains grew higher and higher to protect our country. I realized that a frightful catastrophe was in progress. I saw the mighty yellow waves, the floating rubble of civilization, and the drowned bodies of uncounted thousands. When the whole sea turned to blood, this vision lasted about an hour. I was perplexed and nauseated, and ashamed of my weakness. 2 weeks passed, then the vision recurred, under the same conditions, even more vividly than before, and the blood was more emphasized. An inner voice spoke, "Look at it well. It is wholly real and it will be so. You cannot doubt it." That winter, someone asked me what I thought were the political prospects of the world in the near future. I replied that I had no thoughts on the matter, but that I saw rivers of blood. I asked myself whether these visions pointed to a revolution, but could not really imagine anything of the sort, and so I drew the conclusion that they had to do with me myself, and decided that I was menaced by a psychosis. The idea of war did not occur to me at all. Soon afterward, in the spring and early summer of 1914, I had a thrice-repeated dream in the middle of summer. It was Arctic cold waves descending in frozen land of ice. I saw, for example, the whole of Lorraine and its canals frozen in the entire region, totally deserted by human beings. All living green things were killed by frost. This dream came in April and May, for the last time in June 1914. In the third dream, frightful cold again descended from out of the cosmos. This dream, however, had an unexpected end. There stood a leaf-bearing tree, but without fruit. My tree of life, I thought, whose leaves had been transformed by the effects of the frost into sweet grapes full of healing juices. I plucked the grapes and gave them to a large waiting crowd. At the end of July 1914, I was invited by the British Medical Association to deliver a lecture on the importance of unconscious in psychotherapy at a congress in Aberdeen. I was prepared for something to happen, for such visions and dreams are fateful. In my state of mind just then, with the fears that were pursuing me, it seemed fateful to me that I should have to talk on the importance of the unconscious at such a time. On August 1, the World War broke out. Now my task was clear. I had to try to understand what had happened and to what extent my experience coincided with that of mankind in general. Therefore, my first obligation was to probe the depths of my own psyche. I made a beginning by writing down the fantasies which had come to me during my building game. This work took precedence over everything else. An incessant stream of fantasies had been released, and I did my best not to lose my head, but to find some way to understand these strange things. I stood helpless before an alien world. Everything in it seemed difficult and incomprehensible. I was living in constant state of tension. Often I felt as if gigantic blocks of stone were tumbling down upon me. One thunderstorm followed another. My enduring these storms was a question of brute strength. Others have been shattered by them, Nietzsche and Holderlin and many others. But there was demonic strength in me, and from the beginning there was no doubt in my mind that I must find the meaning of what I was experiencing in these fantasies. When I endured these assaults of the unconscious, I had an answering conviction that I was obeying a higher will, and that feeling continued to uphold me until I had mastered the task. I was frequently so wrought up that I had to do certain yoga exercises in order to hold my emotions in check. But since it was my purpose to know what was going on within myself, I would do these exercises until I had calmed myself enough to resume my work with the unconscious. As soon as I had the feeling that I was myself again, I abandoned this restraint upon the emotions and allowed the images and inner voices to speak afresh. The Indian, on the other hand, does yoga exercises in order to obliterate completely the multitude of psychic contents and images. To the extent that I managed to translate the emotions into images, that is to say, to find the images which were concealed within the emotions, I was inwardly calmed and reassured. I had left those images hidden in the emotions. I might have been torn to pieces by them. There is a chance that I might have succeeded in splitting them off. But in that case, I was inexorably fallen into a neurosis and so been completely destroyed by them anyhow. As a result of my experiment, I learned how helpful it can be, from the therapeutic point of view, to find the particular images which lie behind emotions. I wrote down fantasies as well as I could and made an earnest effort to analyze the psychic conditions under which they had arisen. I was able to do this only in clumsy language. First, I formulated the things as I had observed them, usually in high-flown language, for that corresponds to the style of the archetypes. Archetypes speak the language of high rhetoric, even of bombast. It is a style I find embarrassing. It grates on my nerves, and when someone draws his nails down a plaster wall or scrapes his knife against a plate. But since I did not know what was going on, I had no choice but to write everything down in the style selected by the unconscious itself. Sometimes it was as if I were hearing in my ears, sometimes feeling it with my mouth, as if my tongue were formulating words. Now and then I heard myself whispering aloud. Below the threshold of consciousness, everything was seething with life. From the beginning I had conceived my voluntary confrontation with the unconscious as a significant experiment which I myself was conducting, and in whose outcome I was vitally interested. Today I might equally say that it was an experiment which was being conducted on me. One of the greatest difficulties for me lay in dealing with my negative feelings. I was voluntarily submitting myself to emotions of which I could not really approve, and I was writing down fantasies which often struck me as nonsense, and toward which I had strong resistances. For as long as we do not understand their meaning, such fantasies are a diabolical mixture of the sublime and the ridiculous. It cost me a great deal to undergo them, but I had been challenged by fate. Only by extreme effort was I finally able to escape from the labyrinth.